when it comes to the discussion of life issues, specifically the U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSiteNews, Ben Johnson. And he's also the guest host of Nothing But Truth. How are you, Ben?
Very well, and that last one is my favorite title, so thank you for mentioning it.
You're great, man. I got to tell you this. My best half sends her best to you. And one of the things we think about when Ben Johnson's doing his work is how blessed we are to have somebody in the community of life who's so talented as a journalist and a writer. Now, Ben, I'm going someplace with this, so it's just not just like, oh, I love Ben. Everybody knows I love you, brother. I love your work. I love your passion. I love what you stand for, and I love what you do. I was speaking about this because I had a visit from my mother-in-law this week, and that is a great thing, another wonderful part of God's blessings. But she runs crisis pregnancy centers in the great state of Alabama. Runs about, I believe, 4 of them. And we were talking about life and people being able to understand the issue, to communicate the issue. And you said something last week about the passion of those on the pro-abortion side. And I referenced that earlier this week in a post, but it's so important that we understand that when we are hearing things supporting abortion, there is a mindset, a worldview out there, and it is misguided as it comes, but there's a way to address it. If you wouldn't mind just recapping why we see such passion for those who are in the business of, bottom line, killing babies, and how best to engage them. Ben.
Yeah, when it comes to the issue of why it is that people support abortion and the worldview that goes with that, it's the worldview of secular feminism writ large. Now, when most people think of feminism, at least people of a certain age, they think of equal pay or women being able to work outside of the home, things of that sort. They equate it with equality and things that are generally positive. What we mean is something much different, which is what feminist ideologues believe, which is that home life is oppressive. The presence of males in general is oppressive. Hillary Clinton, in one of her early papers when she was in college, wrote that the family structure was akin to slavery. And this is the mindset that they carry with them. To be able to abort a child means that you are in control of your own life. You are, in the words of Saul Victus, the master of your own domain in all that you say and do. So that a man can't tie you down and keep you barefoot and pregnant in the home by getting you pregnant. You are able to go out, have your own career, self-actualize on your own terms, and that the greatest joy in life will be found in using your intellectual abilities in the career field the way that men do. Most women, on the other hand, when you actually poll them, and particularly working women who have entered the workforce in the last 30 years in record numbers, say their greatest joy comes from family. It comes from raising children. It comes from being mom. That's where the greatest joy comes from. And by the way, the same is true for dads. Their greatest joy comes from being a dad. Their greatest joy comes from being part of the family. And the feminist movement has done this bait and switch shell game to try and encourage women to forget about the thing that will bring them the greatest amount of joy in order to go out and find the highest sacrament of the pro-abortion feminist culture, which is an abortion, something that will bring them lifelong pain.
Ben, what question is your first question to somebody who supports abortion when you're being salt and light and speaking truth and love? What question do you ask them?
I would ask them, when this woman that you're speaking to, one of the women who comes to you and says, "What should I do?" and you tell them to get an abortion, are you going to be there 6 months down the road when they're crying every night? Are you going to be there answering the phone for them when they have such grief? And if they deny that it happens, I'll take them to a Silent No More meeting or a Rachel's Vineyard meeting, if I would be allowed access to them, and allow them to hear these women from Silent No More tell their stories of how abortion led them to a life of regret, a life many times of addiction or falling into what is now called domestic partner violence, but in the old days we would have called it domestic violence. Things that because they had an abortion, they believe they're not worthy of anything better. They're not worthy of someone to treat them with respect. They're not worthy of life, and as a result, it leads them down a spiraling path. I would ask them, you promised them that this would be a solution. Are you going to be there to help solve all the other problems this abortion will cause?
And for those of you, that's a good place to take some notes on how to engage, because it is important that we win the hearts and minds, but to do that, sometimes we have a limited amount of time, and we can know what we're facing and know how to address it to bring the truth. Ben, I know you've done the story, the breakdown of the New York City abortion statistics. Very interesting. Something else that is interesting is a part of that is that there are more black babies that are being aborted than born in New York City. Your thoughts, and if you could bring us some background to what is going on in what you've detailed as the abortion capital of the country.
Well, it is. It's the abortion capital of the entire country. In fact, maybe one of the highest abortion rates in the world. New York City, the Big Apple, has an abortion rate that has held higher than most industrialized places around the world. Thankfully, and the one silver lining in this is that rate went down precipitously this past year, the lowest rate that they've had in since I believe 1973. Very low rate for them, but it's an astronomical rate compared to the rest of the world. And the one aspect that you picked up on is the fact that the black abortion rate is astronomical in New York City. It always has been. It went down moderately this past year, but it's still tremendously too high. There were 33,000 abortions from black women, which is several thousand more than there were births in the year 2012, 2013. It was a terrible rate. Between blacks and Hispanic women, they made up almost 3/4 of all abortions in New York City. Now, you know and I know blacks and Hispanics do not make up 3/4 of the population of New York City. So this is a disproportionate impact for a government that's interested in the disparate impact of everything else. They show no interest in the fact that disparate impact happens to where it is the most important, which is the population and survival of minority women and their children. This is an unfortunate thing that has gone without notice, without mention from this administration. But in New York City, thankfully, as I say, the overall rate has actually gone down somewhat in the year 2012. It will probably, we hope, continue due to a slightly better economy. But when you're looking for a reason for the astronomical black abortion rate, I think you have to look at a couple of things. You've got real unemployment in the United States is about 12%. The number on the books is between 6 and 7. The black unemployment rate on the books is double that. We have to assume the real unemployment rate there even higher. The economic policies of the Obama administration have been devastating to everyone, but even more so to the minority community who had less to begin with and are finding themselves very hard hit.
Ben, you just went to the foundation of what the issues are at our play in our country today. People say it's not a culture issue, it's an economic issue, it's this issue. No, but the culture fundamentally is where we have to begin, because if it's built on sand, it's going to slide in. It will have those overall impacts. And so is this something that should be addressed in the political sphere in light of the fact that often the response from those on the left is to say something about the line of being some ism when you are trying to advance a particular policy? Should we, Americans, regardless of color, start talking about the disproportionate nature of abortion in minority communities?
I think that we do now. Obviously, whenever you're talking about race, it's a thorny issue. And all the more so when you have people like Barack Obama and his defenders who make everything a polarizing racial issue. things, the use of the term Obamacare is now used as a substitute allegedly for racial epithet in this country. So it's a thorny issue. The area that would have the greatest good would be within the black community itself. Black preachers, people in the black church, people who are black community leaders. Jesse Jackson, we have to remember, actually once spoke at the March for Life, and he said that abortion was genocide. That was the emphasis of the March for Life a few years ago. Several people stood on the platform and said, our people are dying as a result of this. Our population has been decimated by abortion. We have the highest abortion rate of any group here, and no one in our community is willing to talk about it, either because of fear of pressure, fear of someone will leave the church or pull their donation, or they're dealing with a pastoral issue, and this has crept up in that way. That's where the greatest good can be done, is within the community itself. There are a lot of great people, like my friend Walter Hoy and others, who are bringing this issue up day in and day out, trying to save babies in general, but beginning where they are in the black community. So I think that we have to realize that there is a real component here. And then secondly, also realize the economic issue and the economic component of it. There is a disproportionate impact, and this is one of the impacts. Whenever the economy goes down, abortion rates go up. That's true among people regardless of race. The lower the income, the higher the abortion rate generally. And so all of these things have to be kept in mind. We have to deal with them, and we need a president who is sensitive to the real needs of the people and the real needs of our people across this country, regardless of race, a good-paying job, the right to live, and the right to live according to our conscience.
And again, we can cite history and the history of Planned Parenthood behind that as a way. I appreciate how you answered that question, because we don't like to talk about race. It's not about race, not color. But if we're seeing these issues and we're seeing disproportion, we're saying, okay, well, let's look. Who's really caring about life? Who's talking about this? Who's mentioning it? What policies are advancing it? What tax dollars are going to what group or what organization, like Planned Parenthood, for example? That said,
yeah, if I might,
yes, please.
One of the other aspects of this is that not only are we dealing with disproportionate impact, but there's also the reality of where the abortion clinics are located, and there's the ideology of Planned Parenthood's founder, Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, of course, a eugenicist. She spoke to the Ku Klux Klan. She referred to human beings as, quote, human weeds. That was one of her beliefs and one of her views. She held to basically what the progressive movement of that time believed, which was that science would cure everything, and part of the way that it would cure things is if you empowered a government to get rid of certain people who should not reproduce. And for her, that included disproportionately poor people, people who were suffering from certain diseases, and minorities. It always galls me when people accuse pro-lifers of being racist. We're out on the front lines trying to save everyone regardless of race. Makes no difference to us what color the baby is. We just want human life to be respected. And yet the founder of Planned Parenthood was a dedicated eugenicist. The ridiculous nature of that cannot be emphasized enough.
And that is where inevitably I wanted to go with that, because to make that point, and you did it so well. Tell me this: South Dakota kills a bill to ban dismembering and decapitating babies during abortion. Why would they kill this bill, Ben?
Well, that's a good question. In South Dakota, there's sort of a unique situation, which is that they are waging a heart and soul legal battle over there, being headed up by Harold Cassidy. And they are doing their best to defend their laws in the courts. And they believe that if the legal battle goes well, Roe versus Wade will be overturned as a result of it. Certain forces within the pro-life movement, particularly in the state of South Dakota, peculiar to it, want everything focused on the impact of abortion on a woman, and this bill didn't necessarily have that effect, so they voted it down. I was introduced by State Representative Marcus Latteral, and he would have made it a felony to dismember a child, which is the way that second-term abortion is done, from week 13 forward. That would have made it a felony, and that bill was voted down. Also, a bill that he introduced would have made it a crime to abort a child who was diagnosed with Down syndrome. That was voted down on the same day.
Ben Johnson, I'm going to post the latest, your story on State Rep. Isaac Latteral, and I thank you for for taking the time today. It is always a pleasure. Thank you, my friend. Take care.
Thanks so much. God bless.
Thank you. God bless. You hear me talk a lot about freedom and defending those that and standing up for those who desire to be free. Well, that's not just in foreign policy, and it's not just outside the womb. And that's why we talk to Ben Johnson, because we want to give the voice to those who are the voiceless. And Ben does just that in his outstanding work at LifeSiteNews. Crane Durham, Something But Truth. We return with a lot of mo on the flip side. AFR Talk.